Meanwhile, we're back once again with our police chief, Jim Blocker, Battle Creek, and our Calhoun County Sheriff, Matt Saxton. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. It's good to be here at 95.3 this morning.
We were just having a conversation because, okay, inside baseball, but some of you have heard us maybe saying 95.3 more, and so things around here are routine, and so we have notes. Nico and I have notes around here reminding ourselves to say 95.3, and so the police chief was just doing as we were doing.
Doing what I'm told.
Yes, so were we. So there we go. Thank you. What station are we on?
95.3.
WBCK.
Wow, this is great. Maybe you guys should hang around longer. Well, thanks for coming today. You know, I had a listener talk to me about these visits, and so we're glad that you're so available to stop in on what is really a regular basis to visit with us on a number of different law enforcement subject matter items. But this person said to me, why don't we talk sometime about traffic stops? And so it occurred to me that we haven't talked about that. And so today's the day that we'll do that. It is, I suppose there are a number of considerations to take into account, and we've talked about it from your perspective, safety considerations and others, when you're stopping a vehicle in a routine situation. But many of us may not think about what is involved there and generally how we should react in a favorable way. And so that's our intent today. Are there things that people don't think about that they should think about in these kinds of situations?
Well, and you mentioned it in your question, the word routine.
Yeah.
To each individual officer or deputy, there is no routine traffic stop.
Yeah.
Everyone is different, and unfortunately, in today's day and age, we're already up to 15 law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty this year alone.
And it's February 6th?
Yes.
Oh my
So
gosh.
we're up last year, and we're up 100% from this time last year. So
that's incredible. So yeah, your point is well taken. It's not a routine thing.
But we expect our men and women to act professionally on a traffic stop, communicate well with those they pull over, and all we ask for in return is that same professionalism back to our officers. They're out there trying to make our community safer by enforcing the traffic laws that are on the books. They don't enjoy writing tickets or making traffic stops. They're out there doing their job. So they should act, our people should act professionally towards you, and we would expect that back in return.
Any thoughts, Chief?
Well, just like the sheriff said, it is a remarkably vulnerable point when an officer's walking up to a car, thoroughly exposed. But also, that's during the day. At night, sometimes the driver feels just as vulnerable because they don't know, because they can't see who's coming up from behind. They see the lights, they see the headlights, but they don't necessarily see who it is. And so again, we want our folks to treat people with professionalism, respect, and dignity. And we want that in return. But also, I think one thing that I think we're going to go and we're going to talk about is what are some of the safety tips, certainly for our female drivers or those that are intimidated by that event, don't feel particularly safe. What can they do? And there are a series of things that we would ask that you do if you want to try to move to a safer place. And this is in regards to traffic stops at night.
Okay, and we'll talk about that in just a minute on 95.3 WBCK Monday morning. BCK, we're here with Battle Creek Police Chief Jim Blocker and Calhoun County Sheriff Matt Saxton. We're talking about traffic stops. I sound like a bit of a music DJ when I say this is by request, but someone did ask, can we talk about this? So we are today. Chief, you were mentioning there are some safety steps that one can take, even with the presumption that when you're pulling over, this is a police officer, this is a safe situation, but there are things you can do to ensure that.
There are, and right at that moment when you realize that you are being stopped and you don't feel safe, and maybe you don't even feel like you're in a safe area, All we would ask is that you turn your dome light on, you turn your hazards on. At least you are trying to communicate to that officer who's attempting to make that traffic stop. Stay within the speed limit, certainly don't speed up, and then move to the nearest, and I don't mean 2, 3, 4, 5 miles away. Move to the nearest well-lit area that you can find that you feel reasonably safe. And then once that traffic stop, it happens and you've come to a complete stop, keep those hazards on, keep that dome light on, and then just communicate. Give the officer what he asks for, typically your driver's license and your registration information. Certainly start with your driver's license. And there's certainly no reason why you can't ask, well, who are you and what department are you from?
Mm, good point.
Well, and even to the extent if you are concerned that you don't feel that that person pulling you over is a police officer, uh, if you have a cell phone, call 911 and tell them where you're at. And 99% of the time, they're going to say, "Yeah, that's a police officer. Pull over to the side of the road." We very rarely see police officer impersonators.
Mhm.
We hear them on the news from time to time, but that's a rare event. Um, but if you don't feel safe at the first part of that traffic stop, like Chief Blocker mentioned, move to a well-lit area that you feel a little bit safer. But typically, if there's a car with lights behind you, you probably violated a traffic law and you are being stopped by a police officer.
Yeah, to impersonate someone of law enforcement with all of these things that they would need, a uniform, a car with lights, uh, you would have to go through a lot of check steps to do that. It must not be easy.
Well, and for the most part, all of our vehicles are marked with emergency lights and stickering, and our folks are going to be in uniform when they come up to your vehicle.
I presume that it's the same way with the Battle Creek Police, right? I mean, it's possible, I suppose, that you'd have a plainclothes officer pull you over, but that would be rare, wouldn't
It's excessively rare, and that's only going to be an extreme scenario. It's really not within our guidelines. Our policies and our procedures are that vehicles that are making involved in traffic pursuits, certainly traffic stops, they're going to be fully marked. So black and whites for us, and then well lit 360-degree lighting vehicles.
it? You talked about how calling 911 if you're not certain can verify that this is an officer behind you. Thinking about that, it's possible that when you call 911, I suppose that the person with whom you're speaking is the same person that an officer may have been reporting to over the radio. Is that true or no?
Right here in Calhoun County, all our 911 calls go to one center.
Uh-huh.
So, while we have call takers at the 911 dispatch center, they're going to be sitting right next to that dispatcher that is taking the traffic stop from the officer over the radio.
All right, so not necessarily the same person, but in the same room with
Right,
that person. Yeah, so that's easy to verify that. That may not be something that occurs to someone to dial 911 and make that verification.
Well, that's right. And, and this rarely happens. It doesn't happen a lot. We really do have a cooperative community. But when it does, this is just some advice. And certainly to answer your question posed last week is what are some things that you can do? And our officers, our deputies, our troopers, they key in. They've been doing it for long enough to know that, okay, this is clearly a cooperative person, and they'll usually key in what they're trying to do in those indicators, and they'll work back with them.
Well, and just to make it clear, we're not saying do that every time you're stopped.
Understand.
If you feel uncomfortable, you don't feel safe, that's an option to use.
Mm-hmm. You talk about
99% of the time, you're going to know why you're getting pulled over typically.
all right. You talked about going to a well lit spot if it's dark, obviously. I mean, as you said, not 3 or 4 miles away, but at what point is it reasonable to drive a little further? At what point do you say, okay, this person is not being cooperative anymore, they're not pulling over?
Well, and all of that's typically that officer is already communicating all of that. Other officers or deputies or troopers will get involved. And I think it would become very obvious very soon if the traffic stop is legitimate.
Yeah. All right, we're here with Chief Jim Blocker and Sheriff Matt Saxton about traffic stops is what we're talking about. We'll pick up where we leave off in just a minute. 8:20. BCK, we're here with the Chief of Police in Battle Creek, Jim Blocker, and the Calhoun County Sheriff, Matt Saxton. So I think the notion with the request for us to discuss this had to do with differences in gender with folks in a car that you may stop. Do you approach a car that might be an uncooperative situation differently if there are male or female passengers or both? Is there a difference?
I would say specifically no. If we're affecting a felony traffic stop, we're going to stop that vehicle the same whether it's a male or female driver. There'll be loud commands asking them to exit the vehicle, go through a whole process for their safety and our safety.
Mm-hmm.
But typically, especially at nighttime when we make that traffic stop, we don't know whether it's a male, female in the driver's seat. We're stopping a vehicle for a traffic violation, and most of the time, until we get up to that driver's side window or passenger side window, we don't know the race, sex of the driver of that vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add, Chief?
Well, no, and I think importantly too is that in terms of the numbers, I think this came up earlier, or indirectly, is that out of the nearly 8,000 traffic stops conducted last year alone, there are only about 2,100 violations, and then we're really obligated to identify a most at fault during an accident. So that includes accidents as well.
Oh, got it.
And so it doesn't happen quite that much. And again, we have a really cooperative community. But again, these are just some helpful hints if in that case someone doesn't feel comfortable what they ought to do. But cooperate first, don't adjudicate out on the street.
Understood.
That's really what we ask for.
And because that becomes a tricky interaction because you then are trying to interpret what that means.
Exactly. If you're being stopped and there is a violation or a citation issue, the time to argue about that is not there at that moment. The best time to have that discussion is when everyone's away. There have been a few days afterwards. You can think through the scenario and you'll have your day in court. That is guaranteed.
Another question that's come up. If a person has a weapon in the car legally, does that change the approach that you take?
Well, oftentimes we get that question, and those folks with a concealed weapons permit through their training for that typically will be instructed how to act on a traffic stop. By law, if they have a CPL and they are carrying at the time, they need to notify the officer that they have a CPL and they are carrying a weapon at that time. And it should be done in that order. And I would suggest to those CPL holders, even if you are not carrying a weapon at the time, let that officer know that you do have a CPL license and are not carrying, because when they run your name, we're going to see that this person has a CPL.
Mm-hmm.
So for those people with CPLs, and most everyone with the CPLs are good about it, when that first contact is made with the officer and they ask for driver's license, registration, and insurance, provide them that CPL license as well, and at that time let them know if you are carrying or not, but explain to them first that that you do have a CPL.
What's the thought in the mind of a law enforcement officer if that's not revealed? If they have a CPL and they haven't told you, does that change the disposition?
It's certainly not helpful, and more importantly, it's a violation of not only the training, but who knows what action the officer can take. He has the option, use his utmost discretion, or he can ultimately say this is a violation. There is a really helpful, short, and well done video that Freedom Firearms put together here locally. It's on our Facebook page. One of our officers was a part of that video. And I would really encourage and try to point everyone to watch that video, because what it does is it actively demonstrates how you should act, and really gives an example of how you shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, maybe we can embed that in our post that will go up with this interview on it later,
Sure.
and folks can see that.
And one other thing for those not involved with the traffic stop, especially out on the highways and freeways, the move over law. if you see a emergency vehicle on the side of the road with their lights on, by law, you're required to slow down and move over. So make sure you're doing that. We nationally lose officers, firefighters quite often in those situations. So follow the law, make sure you do slow down and move over for emergency vehicles.
And by that, we mean that we presume then that if there's a traffic stop, it's going to be on the right shoulder, so you'll want to move to the left lane to offer some extra buffer zone there when that's happening. Now, there are some exceptions to that, I presume, if there's a semi next to you or something, and you can't immediately move over.
Well, and that's just that. If you can't move over, the slow down part comes into it. So
right.
It is slow down, move over, and slow down. Or so.
Okay. So we'll do that, and remember that I know some people are well aware of that, and you see it fairly often. But I have also met people. I can think of a friend of mine a few years ago who claimed she had no idea, and she went past a traffic stop in the right lane, and somebody promptly pulled her over, and she got a citation for that. This is not. Folks don't just move over out of courtesy. This is a law.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And
All
just about every state nationally has that law now. So.
Okay, so we've all caught up.
Yep.
Fair enough. We appreciate, as always, your insight on this, and we'll share that video later at WBCKFM.com.
And
Thank
you
you.
heard it here at 95.3 WBCK.
I think you guys could do a show all yourselves. I might just take the day off next time.
We're setting up for success this morning.
That's what you're doing. Thank you. Chief Jim Blocker, Sheriff Matt Saxton on 95.3 WBCK.